New exciting ideas, oftentimes pulling from some of the world-class research that's being done by people in this room. Our evaluation teams are then able to go out and actually measure the impact, test those ideas, and see what works. And then when we have good evidence for something that works, we're able to pass that directly over to the parts of our organization that are working on implementation, and they're then able to make sure that we can get some of those new ideas to scale as quickly as possible. And because the work that we do touches on a lot of different areas of life for rural communities, we're oftentimes asking ourselves a variety of different questions that link to different ways that we could be improving our program and services. So for example, we might ask how much firewood could a farmer potentially save by adopting a more efficient cooking stove? We might ask how could we enroll more farmers in our program through better marketing and community outreach strategies? We ask questions like how can we encourage farmers to diversify their crops and their incomes by growing new crops? And on the more agronomy side, we're looking at questions around how can we improve and maximize maize yields through better fertilizers, seeds, etc. And so to get at these questions, we use a variety of different approaches to evaluation. And we really believe that different types of questions, different decisions that we need to make in the organization may require different types or combinations of evaluation methods. So we do use randomized controlled trials in some cases where we really want to have the most rigorous evaluation of impact possible, and we really want to understand at a very specific level the impact of a new product or potentially a change in our program. We also use a number of human-centered design approaches where we want to potentially engage on a more personal level with farmers, understand their needs, and in some cases co-create or co-design solutions with them. We have agricultural research stations and on-farm trial sites, and those allow us to very carefully measure yield differences between new varieties or new fertilizer types. We use a lot of business intelligence and other analytics to try and understand our client base, what their preferences are, what causes them to make certain decisions around which products they purchase. And then we have a number of other qualitative and quantitative methods that we use to try and understand the effect of our program on the stakeholders that are involved. So I want to run through briefly just one example of an innovation process that happened recently and the different types of evaluation methods that we use throughout. So this is regarding agricultural lime. I'm sure many in this room know that soil acidity is a major challenge for many farmers in this region, and lime is something that farmers could potentially apply to their soils to reduce acidity and potentially improve yields. But we still see that among smallholder farmers there are very low rates of application and use of lime. So our trials here started in the first phase on our research stations. So here we have pretty well-trained staff who are able to measure differences in yield outcomes in a pretty controlled environment. So they can test different application rates, different application methods, and we can measure the harvests and compare them quite rigorously. When that looks successful, we can move on to a second phase, and this is when we start actually involving farmers in the process. So we have on-farm trials. Farmers themselves are going to be growing maize with lime side by side with maize planted without lime. And again, at this stage, we're able to measure yield effects on a larger scale and relatively rigorously. But the other thing that's really important to us at this phase is being able to start getting farmer feedback. So we'll ask them questions about how does this training interact with, how do you interact with this training? Was it easy to use, hard to use? Was the method that we were trying to teach people, could we improve that in some way to make it more user-friendly? And then at that phase, we basically had, and combined with all the literature that's already out there, some pretty strong evidence that lime is a good investment for a lot of our farmers. But again, the problem was still that the adoption rates were very, very low. So very few farmers actually wanted to purchase agricultural lime from us. Many of them didn't understand what it was or why they should want to use it. And I know a lot of people in this room are also thinking a lot about adoption of these technologies. So at this phase, we actually looked at a randomized controlled trial to test different strategies for boosting adoption of lime, looking at things like targeted SMS messaging, looking at ways that we could better educate our field officers and incentivize them to be good salespeople for lime, those sorts of things. And we were excited to see that we actually did have some pretty good results from that, that were strategies that we saw were able to get adoption of lime much higher than it had been previously. And so using a combination of all of these methods, we then decided to move ahead with a full-scale rollout of Lime across the program. And for us, that means that all of our farmers in Kenya will now have the opportunity to purchase Lime and will receive trainings about how to use Lime on their fields. And we will continue to evaluate this technology through our annual harvest measurements that we use every year to determine the impact of the program. So this is an example of sort of a phased approach whereby we hope the end result is an innovation that will be successful at scale. So to wrap up, I just want to make two main points about how we think about evaluation and innovation at 1 Acre Fund. The first is that our research is focused on getting results that are as practical and actionable as possible. So at the end of the day, we are not an academic institution. We are a social business with many, many customers. And while we do care a lot about rigor and good results, we also can't always wait for the perfect answer or the perfect study. And so we focus our research on things that we think will have a direct link to ways that we can improve our program, and things where we will get answers that could potentially be put to very quick use and be very meaningful for the clients that we work with. And the second point is just to say that we continue to make sure that farmers are really at the heart of everything that we do. It goes back to the point I just made, but essentially the reason that we care so much about good evidence, good rigorous impact evaluations, and making good decisions is because we know that many, many farmers are depending on those results and are really asking those same questions. And so that really is the motivation for why we are often thinking about how we can do a rigorous evaluation, but then making sure it's as actionable and as appropriate and relevant as possible for the actual clients that we are trying to serve. So with that, I am done.